Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and Merry Christmas to you, or whatever your preferred holiday celebration is. Happy celebration. Today, I want to give you the gift of the bad writing rules, or the writing suggestions, rules, whatever, that ruined writers, I think. I got 15 of them for you. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, be the gift that keeps on giving next year, check out the link down in the description below. Number one way is Lemoy, where I give you a prompt. You submit the prompt. First Monday video of the month is an ode to everybody's glory by reading your guys' prompts. And then the other way is if you are an indie author and you've got a book out there or coming out, just send in your first chapter and your cover page. They will be read here on the channel, and hopefully that'll help more readers find your book. So both of those links are down below. Third thing is, if you would like to read any of my books, wow, I almost forgot what I was going to say. If you would like to read any of my books, they are available anywhere that you can get books. It might be a great way to spend, some of the quiet moments on this long weekend, or when you're out at New Year's Eve parties and you're sitting waiting for your person to show up and you need something to, spend the time with. Great way to do it. So that's all that I've got to say. Let's jump into the video. So there is not a drought for writing suggestion content on YouTube, in books, in everywhere, and pretty much everyone is suggesting what is or what you should do or how to write a good book. When I give suggestions, I just try to tell you what my processes are or how I view things, and you can interpret that however you want. There is not one single way in which how to do things. We all just kind of take what sounds good, use what we want, and then discard the rest. So that's all of it. But consistently, sometimes we will see the same writing advice across people, and it's very easy to accidentally take writing advice as more than just a suggestion. And I think some things have been taken so seriously that it has legitimately harmed writing by how much people think of these things as, this is the rule, don't ever do this, or definitely always do this. So then when people start reading books or looking at other people's works in progress, they always bring up these things regardless of the rest of the context. It is, they said never do this, so never do this. So these are 15 different writing rules that I've seen kind of go around that I feel like have actually been a detriment to writing because they're taken so strictly and applied so strictly. Number one is character is strongest, most beautiful, most unique, and this is judged immediately rather than seeing how it plays into a story. So I think that this judgment comes from the amount of like Mary Sue content or perfect character or main character syndrome content, where the character who is the main character, where the main character is given these extreme attributes of being the strongest or the best around for no apparent reason. And it doesn't play into the story, and it's never really brought up into the story. They're just the greatest. And then any of the maybe villains that they run into, they beat immediately, or any of the opposite sex that they run into, that person falls for them immediately. If it's a female character, everybody wants to have sex with them. If it's a male character, everybody wants to have sex with them. I've seen those stories too. And so even in cases where there's a reason for a character to be the strongest or the best or the whatever, it's all automatically judged of, well, why do they have to be the strongest? Why do they have to be the most beautiful? And maybe there's a story or a lore behind them. If we're talking about Yakuza, we got Kiryu, who's known as the Dragon of Dojima. So then it makes sense that he's this super strong character, even in 1989, when it's his origin story, because it's building into this legend that he's going to become later. And so it's fine for him to have to build into this thing and then be known as this legend. It's fine for a story to have the most beautiful character be this female character if maybe her beauty is so powerful that it causes wars. That's Helen of Troy. So like these things can happen. Or if you have these supernatural creatures that are just the most beautiful thing in all of anything, that might not even be a main character. That might just be a trait that you gave that character to build into this lore of this supernatural character, or these supernatural characters that are just naturally the most beautiful things that you have ever seen. But I think people have become so sensitive to anybody being called the best around that anytime those words come up in a story, they're like, no, and they smack it. I think that you can get away with it. I think that if you give me a reason in the story, and it doesn't have to be a long-winded reason, you can just say, like I said, this is a beautiful creature. This is a legend that we're about to learn about. It can be anything. As long as you justify it in the story, then it's fine. If you make your character the best at everything and the most beautiful and the on top of everything, and it's only because it's a fantasy of power and it doesn't ever pertain to the story, then people are going to start to notice and critique it. But I don't think inherently that being unique is a terrible thing. Oh, that's another one, is when we go over to Model Land. There was critique of Tookie being considered this unique looking girl, but then like all of the girls that were brought into Model Land and Tookie's group were all considered unique looking compared to what is typically the type of girl that was brought into Model Land. And then, they were highlighting that so much, and the book knew that it was doing that, to the point that it had Tookie form a name for the group, and they were the Unikas. And I don't think that was inherently a problem, because it was part of the story that Model Land was trying to tell with these girls that look different. So I think that you can do that, and I think just mocking the idea of being different for the sin of it being different and stating that these characters are different has kind of taken out a huge option for storytelling because people are so sensitive to it. Number 2 is your first line must be bouncing. So I remember so often, and I think you still get it when you see critiques of first pages, and I'm not an agent, so don't listen to me about about what agents want. But when I'm a reader and I'm opening up a book and it looks like this person tried so hard to get like the edgiest, most different, most cool first line ever, I can tell, because the line isn't character. It's like edginess. It's like trying to be shocking. It's trying to be special. And I don't think that your first line has to be this like most quotable woo moment. I keep thinking of Grady Hendrix because both of those books that I've read and still remember had to do something with death or blood in the first line. And I don't think you're memorable, and I don't think you're edgy. I think you're cliche by doing that. I would rather jump right into the character, and I'm not going to read the first line and then close the book and put it down. Sure, some other people might, and sure, agents may or may not do that. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not an agent. I'm just, a plebeian reader, and I don't get character from a first line in a book. But often I see that edgy attempt at a strong first line that breaks character with the whole rest of the novel because somebody was trying so hard to apply this make your first line so great. And I think sometimes people can focus too hard on making that first line so meaningful that it gets really stressful. And at least from this plebeian's perspective, the first line does not make or break whether I'm going to read your novel. If you have a different opinion on that and you do determine if you're going to read a novel based only on the first line, let me know down in the comments below, because, we all have different ways that we enjoy books. But the first line ain't a deal breaker for me. Number 3, make every word count. This kind of goes with the previous one where people think every word has to apply to the plot or the character or be super prosy and special and sweet, and you can't just have like the story being told as it needs to be told. But I don't think every word has to serve a specific purpose to the plot. You can have something for emotion, you can have something for character, you can have something for description, you can make it prosy or not prosy, it's whatever, but I don't think that you need to stress out on the level of function of every single word in a manuscript. I think once they come together, they will be functional, and you can pay attention to them to get a certain effect. But to stress over every little sentence to make sure every single sentence is very specifically perfect and unique and lyrical and poetic, I think it can be detrimental to some writers. Number 4, don't use the passive voice. This one goes around a lot, and I don't know why the passive voice gets so much hate, but the passive voice isn't inherently bad. The passive voice is mostly bad when you don't want to imply... Jacob, come here. Let me take your collar off. You're dinging so much. There we go. The passive voice is ditched on. The passive voice is really good for when you want to express that maybe a character doesn't have power to do something, is having something done to them, or you want to take the focus out of the subject of a sentence because the subject of the sentence is not that important. Such as, The servants brought out the dishes. A lot of readers won't think twice about that, but some may. And you as the author may not want to highlight that there are servants there. So you could say the dishes were brought out, and then you don't have the servants. This can also express a certain perspective of a character not recognizing unimportant people or what they determine as unimportant people. Another way that you can use passive voice is, like I said, if you have something being done to that character, or you want to express how that character is maybe passive in a situation or their own life. Where the character is not necessarily active, but something is being done to them, can express that passivity. And it can be a powerful thing, especially if part of your storytelling for this characterization is to express that this character is not an active participant in their own life. And maybe that changes over the course of the story if they become active, or maybe the story is just about this inactive person. But there are places in which to use the passive voice. And so blanketly saying don't use the passive voice is an oversimplification of why. I think that also comes down to what a lot of the reasons why these rules or suggestions fail is so prevalent, because because a lot of these videos and advices just say don't do this, and they don't really express why not to do them or how you can use them successfully, because every single thing that is available to us in language is just a tool for us to tell the story, which goes into the next one. Number 5, you must have perfect grammar in your fiction. Not true, because punctuation is like you're a maestro and you're controlling the way that the speed in which the reader reads. If you do a hard return, it breaks the pattern in which the reader is thinking. If you use a period versus a semicolon versus a comma, they all change how quickly the reader reads through the content and how long the pause should be. It's all a manipulation of the reader speed and emotion in some places, and just rhythm of the reading. So there's that as one way for punctuation. But the other thing is that grammar can be imperfect. Somebody can say ain't. Somebody can use words incorrectly, like lie instead of lay, like synonyms, like even just get facts incorrect in character voice, because that's how people talk. And the character might not know things. However, I've seen criticisms that say you cannot make a character dumb, or you cannot make a character speak incorrectly. And often, so often, there will be corrections in dialogue because this character is not speaking correctly. But humans don't necessarily have perfect grammar, and so it's okay to not transfer perfect grammar into your character voices. This carries on over into the next point, which is 6, formal writing in informal settings. So Microsoft Office and other word searches like editors, or the line editors like Grammarly, will try to correct your writing to be formal, and it will often take out stuff like really or very or any modifiers, and it'll try to formalize your writing. And formal writing works very well for like research papers and essays, but it's not necessarily right for fiction, because fiction is about characterization and fiction is storytelling, and informal writing and formal writing aren't the same thing. That's not to say that you can't use formal writing in fiction. However, formal writing is not a requirement of fiction, and some editors and some critiques may try to correct your informal writing to formality, and it's not necessarily correct for the vibe that you're going for. So think about what you want out of your fiction and what vibe you're trying to set, instead of what is formal writing and what is informal writing. Number 7, passive strength, kindness, and female characters who aren't just brutes are so overrated, passe, or they are weak. Look, their strength comes in that's a writing rule. That's a writing suggestion, that female characters have to be strong like men in order to be strong characters. And you see this a lot with like the girl boss, and kind of like I mentioned in the previous video. And there's people overlook a character. People often, I've noticed in conversation that people overlook female characters whose strength may not be overt, but is covert, where their strength is supportive, where their strength is encouragement, where their strength may be softer. Think of like Anna isn't a brute force person in Dead End Drive, but she's one, supportive of Gavin, and two, she is softer in her movements where she doesn't take stuff on front force. She's also a nurturing personality, not just by being a maid, but also, you know, the way that she takes care of Gavin, and the way that she takes and supports Kelly, and the way that she kind of supported Gavin as he was growing up, as kind of whatever they are. But you can have strength that looks more passive. Nobody really argues with this when you're looking at RPGs where you have the characters in the background, the support characters that give you strength that are not the brute force person. But for some reason, when you insert a character whose strength is not straight brute force, they're considered weak, and people try to change them so they do become a brute. But that might not be what the other characters in the story need. And so turning that more passive or quiet or softer strength into a brute strength may take off the balance that your characters have for one another and change the chemistry of the group of the characters in your group. And so I kind of want to challenge people that may only see brute strength or front forward strength as the only kind of strength to maybe rethink how you see strength, because there's a lot of different ways in which it works, and there are a lot of different ways that it looks, and it's not always telling the crazy guy to go and kill, your enemies, like in the puppet. Number 8 is trope avoidance, where we've got all tropes are bad, and if some people see a trope in a story, they're automatically slashing the book saying, it's so unoriginal or it's so crap because it uses tropes. Or in the situation where you're actually at the point where people are deliberately hating on tropes and doing the opposite of those tropes, so now it has become a trope of its own. Or people are just straight up hating an individual trope, where recently I've seen a huge switch on the not like other girls trope, where it's now like, well, I'm not like other girls, so we're gonna hate on the not like other girls because I'm a not like other girls. I actually like being a girl, so I'm better than the not like other girls, and so I'm better than the not like other girls because I like being like other girls, and there's nothing wrong with being like other girls. And now if you're not like other girls, you're a bad person, so why shouldn't you just be like other girls? So I have seen so many conversations. It's fine to be not like other girls, and it's fine to be like other girls. They're just different characters and different story types. But I have seen this absolute hatred and argument and attack now on certain tropes. And it just happens. Like, we like tropes. Also, it's so weird because we've also got marketing gimmicks that are based on tropes. Like Lightlark was sold on tropes, and the recent thing I've seen with social media selling books is highlighting all of the tropes in the book to sell a book on tropes. And so you've either got the hatred of the tropes or the non-hatred marketing gimmicks of the tropes and stories written for the tropes. Can we just find a middle ground that's not like hating all the tropes or only selling to the tropes and not writing a story? I don't know. Maybe it's just me that's like, I'm here for the story, and if there's a trope, that's just a pattern that can be found in places, but it's not a definition of a story. Number 9, relatableness or likableness, or no character flaws that are real and have any sort of actual impact on the storyline. People will actually hate your character if your character's flaws actually affect the storyline. The avoidance of conflict also typically comes with relatableness, because if you have your main character fight other main characters, then people go, well, why is anyone putting up with you? Because nobody likes them. Then there's the the way that people cover this, that I've seen it so many times, where you've got a bitchy main character, and the way that people cover up the bitchiness is they just have nobody recognize that the character is bitchy, and so then they get away with being bitchy while everybody is just at her feet. And apparently that works enough to make her likable. But if you allow the characters to dislike the character for her character flaws, then it's a problem, because then people recognize that she has issues. Then there's also, you're never allowed to look bad. So this happens, this happens so often, specifically with Mary Sue's. This specifically happens with girl bosses, but guy bosses do it too. I would say Will Jordan's character in Dark Harvest did this. Both of them. Both of his main characters did this. But Cameron Becker, the male main character, was never confronted with like everything bad that he did and have to pay the consequences, because every time he broke the rules, broke the law, broke international treaties or whatever, people just congratulated him for it. He didn't have to acknowledge how he got his team killed in the first fifth of the book. He didn't have to acknowledge how he got another team killed later in the book, at the middle section, and he didn't have to acknowledge how he got more people killed all the way at the end. He didn't have to acknowledge or pay for the fact that he went to a TV station to share information. He didn't actually get punished in the end either, after all of this international garbage happened. none of his issues were ever acknowledged as bad by other characters. The same with Laurie Dalton is none of her issues were ever actually acknowledged as being bad when she did bad things. And that's how a lot of people get away with it. With girl bosses, you watch them be bitchy. You watch them smack people. You watch them hurt people and act selfishly and act impulsively and dangerously, and nobody calls them on it. In fact, half of the time, people applaud them for being brave and amazing. This is one of the problems that constantly comes up with Alexa Dunn's books. This constantly comes up with pretty much anything that has a girl boss in it, because one of the rules is with girl bosses, they can never do anything wrong. And so somehow not acknowledging when somebody does something wrong, which is a character growth moment if you allow it to be, makes somebody more relatable. I don't know what the obsession is with relatability. I don't go into a book looking for myself. I go into a book looking for a perspective of somebody else. But I can't expect other people to go into a book for the same reason that I have. I just have never understood this obsession with making sure that you feel like the reader is specifically the character. Like you are trying to capture that other person's experiences. They're not empathizing with somebody outside of their personal experiences. You're trying to make them feel like you've heard their experiences. And those are two completely different things. And I think the focus on relatableness has harmed doing deep character studies, doing intense character actions, because those main characters especially are not allowed to make mistakes or do something really stupid or destructive and recover from, because they're always supposed to be relatable. They're always supposed to be rooted for. I was not rooting for Patrick Bateman. I was just along for the ride. I wasn't rooting against him either. I was just there for the ride. And so the relatableness usually is paired with this idea of needing to root for somebody. And I don't know, maybe somebody can explain to me all of their thoughts on the relatableness of a character as opposed to just observing a character. But I don't think empathy has to do with being relatable to a person, because I kind of see empathizing as being able to understand somebody's perspective, even if I haven't experienced it myself. I can understand their emotional place that they are in, you know? Anyway, enough on that. Number 10, plotting outlining is the only way. Outliners, plotters will 100% make you feel like it's the only way to go. But there is the middle ground of plantsing, and there is pantsing. Both pantsing and plotting come with positives and negatives, where plotting what may help you write your story faster as a whole, because you know where you're beginning, going to, and where you're going to finish, so you can just bloop through it. The problem that I've seen with plotting is that a lot of people do their outline, and they've spent so much time on their outline, which is probably as much time as you'd spend freaking doing revision anyway, but they're immobile from getting away from that plot line. This is what they have determined is going to happen. They've determined it for 10 books that this is what's going to happen, and then they start writing it, and their character motivations don't line up with the way that the story is written. So then you end up breaking character, and then the story doesn't really make sense because you're forcing interactions to happen that shouldn't actually happen that way. That's what I've seen wrong with plotting, and I've seen it. And then with pantsing, the benefit is you're very fluid in your character motivations, your actions, you know, following along with as your character moves. But the problem is that one, you don't necessarily know where you're going to go. So if you're trying to do long form like references back or set things up, you might have more difficulty with that if you don't do revisions to put stuff like put the breadcrumbs in that lead up to that ending spot. And two, it's going to be more time consuming in revision if you do revision as opposed to editing. And then three, you may go completely off the rails. And that's the problem that I've seen with pantsing books, where the stories just don't make sense at some point because the author kind of just swung each and every way, and then they didn't go back and start editing the story to make it all cohesive. So both plotting and pantsing have their strengths and their weaknesses, and personally I think that the best form of writing is somewhere in between, where you've got a bit of a plot going on or a bit of outlining going on, maybe not a whole lot, but at least a general direction in the immediate vicinity of where you're going to go, and then you sort of outline forward as you go, and then you might have some bullet points for big picture stuff in the future if you're doing a whole big thing, but you still leave yourself room that if characters decide to change, you can shift the wind. I may get into this a little bit more when I talk about Bodymore 2 and possibly Bodymore 3 and the editing and revision phases and how I work through those books, because I tend to, since I do planting, I just plan a little bit ahead and then I kind of follow the characters, and then I plan a little more ahead and I follow the characters. And so since I do that, I often end up with a couple red herrings in the first draft because things are being placed as I write that possibly might develop into something later. And then by the time I get to the end of the book, I know better what I need to plan for and what directions the book did not go in. Yeah. So I will probably talk about that at some point. Bodymore 3 has been much worse about this than Bodymore 2 because I feel like there were 3 different plot lines that it could have gone in. And I'm currently working through the second revision for Bodymore 3. And I'm taking a lot of stuff out because it did not go in that direction. So I'm having to rewrite, especially the last act of the book. But it's not terrible. But then this could also just be I'm forgetting what my process was for Bodymore 2, which also had 2 revisions before I got it to the editing phase. Anyway, it's not that bad. I've only been working on Bodymore 3 for about 6 months, and I should have a revision of that by the end of, I'm hoping by Christmas. And then I can be editing, and then it will be off to beta readers. So it doesn't have to be that bad, but in general, there's no right or wrong way to write your book. Find what works for you and piecemeal together the process that makes your book effective and makes your work life effective. Plotting is not the only way. 11, show, don't tell. How many times do we hear show, don't tell for everything? I think this one has poisoned people's minds because I think the best stories are a mixture of show and tell. And sometimes you need to tell people things. And you don't need to show somebody is angry by talking about, their bursted blood veins or their jiggling Adam's apple or whatever. And so then people go to an extreme. I've seen some extreme examples of trying to describe physiological responses in order to show what emotion looks like instead of just telling what the emotion is, which would have been more effective in those cases. You can also end up with people treating like all exposition as if it's telling, when sometimes the characters in the story rightfully ask for information about something, and yeah, it is telling, but the character asked another character for their own knowledge about that information. So show, don't tell, I think, has created a lot of sensitivity towards just expressing something instead of writing everything out. 12, the main character's morality must be good. I think this falls in line with the idea of the relatableness of the main character, but there's this idea often that comes up in book reviews that a main character has to be good or has to be moral, or if they're immoral, then that reflects the ideals of the author in some twisted way because the main character has immoral beliefs that aren't ever corrected. And sometimes people just exist immorally and their worst thoughts are not corrected. And they just believe that for a very long time, if not until the day that they die, whatever that immoral thought is. A character can be immoral. I think recently there was also a conversation I saw asking if a main character needs to be likable or a protagonist needs to be likable. But likability can also correspond with morality, and everybody's morals are also different depending on where you take your morals from. So this is just a very difficult thing, and I don't ever think that you should apply or assume the morality of any of the characters onto the author, or if you need your characters to be moral, that's just going to be a you style issue. Obviously, with everything and all of the writing rules, it's always a personal issue, which is why these are kind of funny. That these sorts of suggestions have become like rules that people are afraid of breaking. Number 13, don't perpetuate harmful stereotypes is a writing rule. Where is the line for this? And what if this thing that you call a harmful stereotype is actually the life that somebody has lived? Like if somebody has grown up in a trailer park and they have an abusive father, is that going to be considered a harmful stereotype? Because of course she grew up in a trailer park and has an abusive father, but now you're making all trailer parks look bad. Or what if somebody is hyposexual and they're on the spectrum? but that's just their experience. Are you going to force that person to express that they're writing a character based on their own experience, or are you going to go after them for writing a harmful stereotype? Because if you tell somebody they can't write something because it makes you think of a stereotype that you think is harmful, then now you are delegitimizing anybody who has had that life experience. So where is the line for this? And at what point do you get to determine what experiences are no longer legitimate? And what point do you get to become the arbiter of whether somebody gives you their personal information to show whether or not they're justified in writing a certain perspective? Number 14, no sensitive topics in your book. Look, some people read for escapism, some people read for perspective, some people read to observe. It's all different types of reading. I don't think there's anything that you're not allowed to write about when it comes to writing. Just do it to the best that you can. And if you're gonna, the spicier the content, the more you can expect feedback that may be spicier. Don't be submitting taboo father-daughter fiction to all of the romance blogs that you know without telling them that you're writing daddy-daughter fiction, and then be surprised when people don't like it. So like, you can write whatever you want. I don't think writing any sort of sensitive topic deserves a backlash of somebody being stalked on the internet or canceled or whatever. But as an author, you should be prepared that if you're going to be spicy, you make it spice back. That's just it. Number 15, if you aren't something, you can't write it. I like to think of writing as an exercise, the ultimate exercise in empathy, because I'm trying to live a story and tell a story and deliver a story of a life of somebody that isn't me. Now, if you want to write a story that is inspired by your experiences or who you are or what you've done, that's fine. But if you're not allowed to write outside of yourself, the only person that you're limiting in your empathy is you. Why should I have to be something else to write something? And I get all of the conversations about sensitivity readers and about, oh, but you don't want to misrepresent this thing. Bro, I've seen women misrepresent men. I've seen men misrepresent women. I've seen women misrepresent women. I've seen men misrepresent men. Can we just accept that bad writing is bad writing? There's nothing deeper to it, and it's okay to be a bad writer. It is not a political statement to be a bad writer. We all start out somewhere. We all try to grow, mostly. That's about it. It's so silly to me to say that if you aren't something, you can't write something, because I'm exploring. I'm not a cannibal. I'm not a necrophiliac. I'm still writing a book about them. It's still own voice. I can't answer questions on that for legal reasons. Number 16, because I misnumbered these, so that's not 15. Merry Christmas. You get an extra number. You owe your readers what they want. That's debatable. It depends on that. So much depends on what type of writer you are. If you're writing for market, then you may want to write more stuff that is going to appease specifically who your reader base is, because that is the reader base that you've cultivated. However, I don't think that an author has any requirement to give readers what they demand, because also readers want very different things. Let's go back to the Teen Wolf situation with Styles and Derek. And a portion of the fan base really wanted a Steric arc in the storyline, but there were some that didn't. Now, if you've got two opposing groups of viewers or readers that want two very different things, how do you choose which one to appease? Is this now all about how much money you can make and which group is the biggest group and which one is more likely to fund your project? Are you required, if you're Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, to continue writing Sherlock Holmes even if you don't want to, because you are required to give the readers what they want? No. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle can stop writing his other projects and come back to Sherlock Holmes if he wants the money. But I don't think any writer has any responsibility to the reader to write anything for the reader, but to try to tell the best story that they possibly can. It's kind of an unreasonable request to demand that writers make sure that they appease you with their writing. I can't speak for anybody else, but writing is a very personal thing for me, and it's very personal about how the characters talk to me and what the characters have to say. And I might take inspiration from other people. I might get ideas from talking to other people, but I am not the kind of person that can write for other people because I'm not writing other people's stories. So I don't know, maybe unpopular opinion, but I hope if you come and read my books, you like my books for the perspective that I write, and you're coming for the characters that I write and the stories that I have to tell, not because you think that I'm going to fulfill your fantasies through my writing. Now, there's a place for that. If that's the type of writer you are, then have at it, but I don't think it's a requirement of every writer to cede their power or their abilities to the readers and do what the readers want instead of what they want. It's an option that every author has to go through, or every artist has to go through to determine why they're here and what they're doing and what their main goal is. And if your goal is not to make a bunch of money and appease the readers specifically, then you get what you get. Anyway, those are my 16, possibly some of them are hot takes. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And also, do you think that there are any other writing rules that you feel like have affected writing discourse or reading discourse, or how people consume storytelling because they're so busy thinking about these writing rules that they were given in craft talks or PowerPoint studies? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and have a good night. Don't die.
Hello, boomers! My name is Yanananana. How are you feeling today? In case you didn't know, I'm a YouTuber from Nide, a small town in eastern Ukraine. My family has never really understood what I do in the woods, but all I've ever wanted is to make a better life for us all. Papa always comes home from the mines dirty, angry, and tired. It's a necessary evil to do your job and be in a place that you don't want to be. But I've never wanted to spend my life doing exactly what was necessary of me. Everything changed for me when a couple of Americans appeared at my door. They said they wanted to sponsor my channel and handed me military-grade explosives. Can you believe it? Military-grade. The lights will be incredible going forward. With this help, my videos will be next level. I just hope they are as they say, and this isn't some kind of trick. I mean, what would there be to gain? Boris says people are simple. Everything comes down to money and power. And Alex tells me ignorance will not save me from trouble. I understand where they are coming from, but I do not like to think that way. There is more to life than a cruel of superficial goods, hatred, and destruction. Anyway, I do not like where this video is going, so I will see you on the explosives field. Boom, boom, boom. Salute.